It's more painful to not make the change than it is to stay in that pain that's when people reach out to us. They just get to that point where I just can't do it like this anymore. Or their doctor says, hey, if you don't make some changes in your diet, if you don't start doing this, or your accountant tells you you're going to be out of money in 30 days, whatever it is, right? That's when people make those changes.
So one of the questions that I have, we've talked about this idea of wellness and what that looks like, and this idea of kind of assessing people in the space of their emotional wellness and where stress comes from. And that's kind of some of the work that you do when you start with your clients. What are some of the qualities that you might be looking for or assessing or seeing in your clients that lets you know that they're kind of on, and I'm assuming in this situation, you're working with, we're talking about people who are maybe on the sickness side. You and I both, typically people are reaching out to us because something's going wrong. So what are some of those things that you're looking for or seeing in your clients?
Yeah, I mean, when people start working with me, it's usually because there's something missing. I wouldn't necessarily say they're sick, but they're definitely not, from their definition, well either. One thing I will say is I do recommend that people go see their traditional doctors, or they go see a functional medicine doctor, because a lot of things that could be going on are below the surface that I don't have an expertise in. So, for example, they might be dealing with a thyroid issue. That's what's creating fatigue for them. And it's not as much an emotional issue as it is a physiological issue. Sure. So I like to just kind of say, hey, you know what? Let's make sure that we hit all the bases so that I can work with you in this area. But if it doesn't affect the change that you want, there could be something else that's going on. And I think that's important to look at the whole person. But typically, the number one thing people are frustrated with is they don't feel that they have the time to focus on the thing that they really want. Whether that's getting into better physical health, like go work out, prepare healthy meals. They're so tired by the end of the day that, they can't remember the last time they had a date night with their spouse. They're not focused to work on, that personal project that they've wanted to, write that book, create that course, take that vacation. There's something missing, but they can't figure out what to do to get over the hurdle, right? To get through the challenge of just living everyday life. So.
Yeah, that's great. I think almost always when I'm working with my clients, it really comes down to time, mostly because by the time they're talking to me, they know they need a little bit of help. And so they're willing to invest the money into it. Otherwise, people who aren't talking to me are saying it's money. So it's time, it's money, and it's energy. One of the philosophies I work with is this idea of Pareto optimization. So it's, a lot of people know Pareto effect 80-20 rule, but they don't recognize that he had a lot of ideas apparently with this guy Pareto. And Pareto optimization, you're optimizing resources in all aspects of a system to where if you pull resources from one part of it and move it to another, it hurts that system. Right. And so really, everybody hears we all have 24 hours in a day, and that's 100% true. You can't change that. However, what we're not asking ourselves is what is so important to me that I'm willing to pull time from this aspect of my life to this other one. We can't increase our time. We can increase our energy and we can increase our money, but we can't increase time. We can only allocate it more effectively. And I think you're bringing up a really good point, which is a lot of times, and I taught this in a sports performance class back in my old life at Purdue. I taught burnout in sports performance specifically. Okay. But a lot of times burnout occurs is when we're putting a lot of effort into something, but we don't necessarily see a return on it, or we don't understand it. There's a discrepancy between the effort I'm putting in and what I feel like I'm getting out of it. And that's what a lot of people struggle with, is they're putting so much effort into this thing called their job or their career. Yeah. And it's not bringing back that satisfaction or that enjoyment or that meaning to their life. And so they get burnt out. They're like, why would I keep doing this when I'm not getting anything from it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And what you said too about time management, and I do a lot of quote time management programs. the first thing I tell people is there's no such thing as time management. The only thing you can manage is yourself getting through those tasks or doing those tasks. So it really is about energy management more than anything else. And also, again, managing yourself, which could have to do with, procrastination, perfectionism, motivation, like all those pieces of, what do I need to do the thing that's right in front of me or that I've been saying that I want to do. One of my favorite resources, and I know you're going to ask me later for one of the books that I like, but
sure.
Since we're talking about energy management, one of the books that we actually was required in my grad school program was The Powerful Engagement. And this is all about managing your energy on the 4 quadrants: physical, emotional, spiritual, and cognitive. And you would have to put together sustainable practices every week to manage your energy in all 4 areas, because everything we do, as you know, requires energy. But since energy is renewable, what are we doing to renew that energy, right? And what are we doing to, relax and recharge our batteries? Because like you said, we only have X number of hours in a day. We all have the same amount of hours, but we can renew our energy. We can renew other resources. One other thing I do want to say about, the 24 hours in a day.
Please.
One of the things that the pandemic gave us, people that are working virtually 100% of the time now. And a lot of entrepreneurs have worked virtually, even before that. And and this is in an article that I wrote, instead of trying to fit, the workday into the 9 to 5 or the 8 to 6 or whatever that box is, recognizing that there's 24 hours in a day. How can I optimize those 24 hours to do the things that I want to do? So that might mean that I spend the morning exercising, taking time to eat a healthy breakfast, spend some time with my family and my kids. And, then I work this block of time. And then, so, in that 24 hours, obviously you want to make sure you get 8 to 9 hours of sleep, but the rest of those hours, if you can allocate them just to optimize, your goals, and, if you're working for somebody else, obviously you're meeting the objective of the work.
Sure. That
is going to go a long way towards energy management. And now you are truly managing your time and doing the things that you want to do.
Yeah. Can I just make one note? You said 8 to 10 hours of sleep, correct?
7 to 9 is the average adult. Yeah. 7 to 9. That's where the 8 hours comes in as the average.
No, so. I would much rather be hearing more 8 to 10s, because I hear 7 to 9. So I was going to say preach, because 8 to 10 to me is yes, because we demonize sleep, and it's just so. I could go on about the need to get more sleep, so I'm not going to. But I think that you share some really vital points. Cal Newport, who talks a lot about this idea of slow productivity, talks about this concept where people keep trying to figure out, like, what's the app that I can use? If I figure out this one optimization tool, I'm going to be able to cram in so much more stuff. And the challenge becomes, okay, you optimize this part of your life, but then you just fill it with more of these things that aren't necessarily aligned with what you're trying to accomplish. So again, I think what you're alluding to, which is profound, is don't try to fit the tools in and add the one more thing and do all this. No, take a step back, strip your calendar down completely, and ask yourself, when do I work best? What work is the most important to me? Tim Ferriss has been talking about this for years.
Yeah, the 4-hour work week. Yeah.
Correct. It's like, what is the one thing? Like, people get scared about this, but like, if you really want to be powerful in your work, what's the one thing you need to get done today to feel like you've accomplished something meaningful?
Absolutely. And that one thing too, when I'm talking about time management programs that I've taught, is take a look at that to-do list that you put together, because we all have them. I mean, I live and die by my to-do list. But when we look at the one thing, it's also asking ourselves, if that schedule blew up, right? The internet goes down, whatever, things happen, and I can only get to one thing. Which is the one thing that would have the biggest negative impact if I didn't get it done? And that's the one I want to focus on, because then I don't have to feel guilty. And that's one of the other challenges, going back to the emotional piece, is making sure that I'm not feeling guilty if I'm taking the morning to be with my kids and take care of myself because, those are traditional work hours. I mean, this was something I worked with for myself was, wait a second, I have 24 hours in the day. Why should I feel guilty if I'm getting everything done? Because it's a traditional work hour that I'm actually doing something that's more personal or self-care related. And that really is the key. There's no such thing anymore, I think, a traditional way that people work. I mean, I do know that obviously there are jobs and industries that are more traditional.
Sure.
But when people are talking about work-life balance, the first thing I say is it's a myth. There is no such thing as work-life balance. And today's workers, more than anything else, especially virtual or hybrid workers, it's work-life blend. And Gen Zs, the younger generation, they don't have any separation between work and life. It's all one thing. And I think it's really important to recognize we bring ourselves to every role that we play. Yeah. So why do I want to separate, who I am during the day?
Absolutely. And that's where my work has shifted drastically, is because really we're having more and more conversations about passion and purpose. I mean, if I had $1 every time a new purpose driven coach, right? Like I've been talking about it for a long time, not any longer than anybody else necessarily, but it's becoming more and more prevalent. And that's exactly why, because everything's blending together. So people want a direction to take. In fact, the model that I'm working on, I've put together a kind of a framework that I'm working off of now based off this new model. And one of the new dimensions that I've added that I haven't yet found in any other wellness model that I can come across is the idea of directional well-being. And it's this idea of, do I know which direction my life wants to take? And do I have the means by which to do that? And then all the other aspects of my well-being support that. Is my physical health well enough that I can do the things towards that direction? Am I spiritually aligned with the things that I want to do with that? And so when you speak that idea of like, there's no work-life balance, it's a blend. And the biggest thing, in my opinion, is it towards something that is meaningful to you? Does the work that you do matter to you? And does the life that you're living matter to you? And can it all fit together?
Absolutely. You just hit the nail on the head, because that's exactly what I teach, is that we feel out of balance when we're not living in alignment to our values, our goals, where we want to, go in our lives. And, that some of that is that spiritual piece as well. When I started my business 12 years ago, Heart-Centered Programs, it's, I played around with, what's my tagline? What do I want to be about? And when you said, purpose, my tagline of my business is empowering people to live and work with more passion, purpose, and play. Yeah. And what I have found, especially helping people, with stress and burnout, is that play piece is the part that's really missing. Because when we feel passionate about something, when we feel like we're doing what we should be doing, we get so serious about it that we forget that, we can still play, we can have fun, we can enjoy our lives. And with so much going on in the world, people feel guilty about enjoying their lives. And, that's also what creates that state of languishing and not really feeling good. And the guilt that people feel, like, who am I to enjoy my life when this is going on over there? So, we do need to take a look at all of that as well. And I do believe that life is meant to be enjoyed. And so finding joy, in many different ways, just putting a smile on your face can just be the joy that you're looking for. My office is yellow. When we bought this house, I walked in and I was like, oh my God, it's bright yellow. But when I'm sitting in it, it is so joyful. I mean, it's actually brighter than it looks on your screen.
Sure.
And I look out the window when I'm in this space, it puts a smile on my face, and it creates that energy of wanting to, do the things that, you sit down to do when you're working. So that's another really important piece of, I think, that emotional wellness dimension is, do I enjoy the environment that I'm in? And what can I do to affect change here? Because that will have a huge impact on your mood.
Yeah. Absolutely. And in fact, that's so Peggy Swarbrick's 8 Dimensions of Wellness includes environmental, wellness is a piece of that. And I think that alludes a little bit to like the more green spaces and clean water and things like that. My model actually has spatial well-being. And so the idea of like, does your space, whether that's in nature or your house or your office or your bedroom or wherever, does it align with the things that you're trying to accomplish for yourself? So to your point, is my office, like you can see like these right here are actually an intentional decision because they've done studies that bubble shapes and multicolors brings happiness. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to fill that space with some happiness. So
yeah. I mean, color therapy, I've got through it. I mean, I know this is a great color. Yeah. You know, when you wear colors that make you feel good, there's that emotional piece. And, you know, I'll never forget it. This was years ago. One of the companies I was working for, we were working at home and then they were bringing everybody, or they closed the office I was working in New Jersey. They were bringing everybody into Manhattan. And I remember the first day I came into my new office space and it was a cubicle in the corner with no light. Like I didn't get the window side of the building. I got the other side. I walked into that cubicle and I literally burst into tears. I was like, there is no way I can work in this space. Yeah. And that's when I realized how important the environment and aesthetics are to me personally, because that just completely shifted how I felt about the job, how I felt about what I was doing. And I realized I needed to make some changes. If I had to work here, what can I do to make this space feel welcoming?
Sure. So, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And for anybody who's in that space, it can be done, right? Like working in a cubicle is something that you can do, but you have to be recognizing how important it is to be intentional with your decisions at that point, right? Like, how do you find your social connections? How do you find your space? They've done buku studies on this idea of, I'm reading a book right now called The Comfort Crisis, and they talk about nature bathing, which is a Japanese concept where literally as little as 20 minutes in a city park, just seeing some green space can drastically change your levels of depression, anxiety. So it is
having those plants in your office are really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just small intentional decisions, but you have to be cognizant of it and aware and willing to make those changes. Yeah. So stepping back to the continuum just a little bit and some of the questions that we shared, when you think of that spectrum, and we've kind of hinted at the idea of like what's on the fitness end of that spectrum, right? So this idea of being more aware of our emotional state and how do we handle the adversities when they come, and we can maybe talk a little bit more about those in a second. But when we think about the sickness end, we're not doing well. One of the questions I pose is, you know, what's a 1 or 2 word term that you might use that would label the sickness end of an emotional well-being continuum?
Yeah, I think it goes to, you know, one of the definitions when we start looking at, you know, am I languishing or even if I'm feeling depressed, is I just no longer feel happy doing anything. It's, you know, that's a very general way of looking at it, but so especially when we're talking about people that are feeling overwhelmed and stressed and burnt out, there's that feeling of what's the point, as you were saying earlier. I'm just not feeling myself. Yeah, at the very early part of recognizing that you know, sickness and burnout, stress, just not feeling myself, not happy. Yeah. You'd mentioned the word flourish earlier, which you can kind of see over my shoulder here. I always get my fingers wrong. Flourish by Martin. One of the founding fathers of positive psychology. Yeah. And when you said the word languishing, that struck a chord, because to me, flourishing is kind of living to your best self in an emotional way. And languishing is almost the exact opposite. And so it's this idea of, you know, just not being at all where you think you should be and just and wallowing in that. Yeah, it's kind of, believe it or not, it's like that middle ground. I mean, it's you know, we'd love to be flourishing in all areas of our life. But, you know, the opposite, I said, well, I'm not really depressed. I don't meet the definition of depression, or I went to the doctor and they can't find anything wrong with me, right? Like everything was, you know, the blood work all came back. Right? So, but we're like, it's almost like that emoji, that meh emoji. Like for the younger generation, it's that meh emoji. But it's like, I don't want to live my life every day in that feeling. So again, I'm not sick by the classic definition of sickness, whether that's physical or mental sickness. I'm not dealing with a mental health challenge. I'm not, clinically depressed, or I don't have anxiety or, any other kind of diagnoses, but I'm also not flourishing. I'm not feeling, this vibrant energy and joy in living my life. So when we're in that place of just languishing, we're just kind of getting by. We're just doing the absolute minimum that we need to do, maybe for our jobs or even in our own careers or in our families. We stopped enjoying doing the things we love to do. We just can't seem to find the energy to get off the couch. So, it's like, what can I do when I'm in that place to get back, or let's say I was never even at that flourishing stage. And it's like, God, what would life be like if I woke up every morning and another day, I can't wait, to have this day. So what can we do to get there?
Yeah, that's phenomenal. And I think that idea of meh is pretty powerful. I think people resonate with that quite a bit. The kind of a different way to look at it that I've seen before is back to the 80-20 rule. 10% of people are flourishing. They're crushing it. You know who they are because they're writing books and they're selling out crowds and they're living their best life. Even if they're not on stage, they're out, mountain biking in Colorado and just loving every second of it, or they own a taco stand on the beach in California. Right? They're just, them, right? They're fun to be around. They're excited to live life. Then there's the 10% that are just clinically, you just know that they're going through something and they're getting support. Hopefully they're finding support by going to the doctor and going to the services that are provided for them. And then there's the 80% in the middle. You think of the bell curve of that rule, right? And there's the 40% that are towards the flourishing. They're like, I just need a little push, a little direction. Then there's the 40% that's like, man, this is going to be an uphill battle, but we got to strive, but we can get there. And that's kind of how I see it when I think about individuals and kind of where they're at on that spectrum is that kind of layout.
Yeah. And for the 80% that, are in that bell curve, the percentage of those that are willing to get the help, that are willing to say, hey, you know what? Life could be better, right? Maybe I have not been able to figure out how to go from where I am to where I want to be, but I'm willing to invest in myself, whether that's working with coaches like, us, or we're taking a course or getting involved in an organization, but having that willingness to make the changes. And that's like when we talk about stress, there's actually 3 steps. There's awareness first. I have to be aware that I'm dealing with stress. I have to know what is creating it. What are my triggers or what is happening? And then the third and probably most important step is being willing to do something about it. Because it's one thing to know that you're stressed or burnt out or unhappy. But if you're not willing to make any changes, of course, your life isn't going to change.
Yeah. And I don't think either of us signed up today to try to solve the world's problems. So I'll keep this part brief. But I think a lot of us our society's gotten to a point where it becomes very easy to distract ourselves because the scary part about dealing with your stressors is that you are going to have to stop for a second and say, what's going on? Why am I feeling this way? You're going to have to go into some feelings on purpose. Right. And it's so much easier for us these days to distract ourselves with the phone, with the social media, with movies. And don't get me wrong, I played 2 hours of video games yesterday. Not many people know this about me, but I'm a video game player.
It's called digital distraction. I've been doing a whole programs on it to help people with that.
I love it. And so when we're asked, and this is true of most humans, but when we're asked, hey, you have this route that's going to be really uncomfortable, but at the very end of it, there's going to be some fulfillment and some enjoyment and some satisfaction, or you have this thing that is in the moment very comfortable, but won't really bring you the happiness you're looking for. We see a lot of people taking the latter.
Yeah, well, because it's the quick fix, and especially today more than when I was younger, we live in a 24-hour world. I mean, the tools that we're using to do this podcast, right? That didn't exist. Internet didn't exist. The cell phone didn't exist. None of that existed. So we were used to living a slower, more patient life. Today, not so much. So, when we think about making long-term changes, it's even more challenging when we live in a instant gratification world today. But there's this story I'll share real briefly. Kind of a farmer goes to visit his fellow farmer, and the guy's sitting on his rocking chair on the porch, and his dog is sitting next to him, and the dog is whimpering. And the neighbor says, "Why is your dog whimpering?" And his friend says, "Well, he's sitting on a nail." And the friend says, "Well, why doesn't the dog just get off the nail?" And the guy says, "Well, because it's not painful enough. It doesn't hurt enough." And I think that's what happens in our lives is we're so used to feeling this way. And it's not so bad that we can't get up and do it again tomorrow. But it's not until it's more painful to not make the change than it is to stay in that pain. That's when people reach out to us. So they just get to that point where I just can't do it like this anymore. Or their doctor says, "Hey, if you don't make some changes in your diet, if you don't start doing this," or your accountant tells you you're going to be out of money in 30 days, whatever it is, right? That's when people make those changes. So
the universe has to be so small, because I literally read this story in a book this morning on my porch swing. It is in a book called The Entitlement Cure.
Okay.
And the exact, you started to say a farmer and his dog on the porch, and I was like, he was laying on, it was a tack in the book, but he was laying on a tack, wasn't he? Yep. And so that's so, yeah. I maybe had heard it alluded to once before in my life, but the same day. Oh, that's funny. But you're absolutely right. And that's the unfortunate circumstance. The two cures that I have shared with people in that regard is it kind of likens back to gratitude and mortality, right? Bringing those two things together. One is you have to go through a very traumatic experience that causes you to really ascertain what's important in life, and you make those changes. I had a heart attack, or my doctor told me I'm going to, if I don't change, and I have children I want to see get married. The other thing is to imagine those things, right? To wake up every morning. In Bhutan, the country of Bhutan, they think about mortality a lot, and they're one of the happiest countries on earth. Yeah, because they recognize that not every day is a gift, and so recognize people. Yes. I often ask myself, what would my life be like if my wife and son weren't in it? Right. Not because I want that to occur, but because I want to remind myself the things that I'm grateful for. Absolutely. And gratitude is one of the things that I teach as well. It's both a mindset and it's a practice. Yeah. So again, one of my favorite books is Attitude of Gratitude by M.J. Ryan. But when we are grateful for things, and it's easy to be grateful for the things that are good. The challenge and the power of that tool is being grateful for the challenges. What did that challenge bring me that helped me grow, helped me overcome something, helped me realize I'm more resilient than I thought I was? So when we can use gratitude in that way, it's a really, really powerful tool. And appreciation too. I mean, what we appreciate. So those everyday things that we've just kind of taken for granted, just find the appreciation of that. Yeah. And if I had to choose whether to have to go through the traumatic experience or at least remind myself that I'm lucky and that things can happen and be grateful now, I would definitely choose the reminding myself on a daily basis, right? Absolutely. Because you don't want to do the opposite with the what if-itis. You don't want to get stuck in the what if, God forbid kind of place. So, yeah.